Welcome to the Small Giants Virtual Workshop.
Today we're talking about setting expectations. So getting clear on some of the most impactful tasks of a specific role. What does success look like for this role? How is someone in that role measured? And ultimately, why does someone in that role even get paid? So to help us with that, we'll be hearing from Bill Flynn, who's probably somewhere in the top of your screen right now too. Bill has a wealth of business experience, of coaching experience. He's an author and a speaker, and he specializes in helping businesses simplify the process of running a business so that they can grow in a profitable and healthy way. So with that, Bill, I'm going to let you take it away.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for your time. Welcome to my living room. I'm glad to have you here. So what we're going to do, we're going to do two things. This is sort of in two parts. One is sort of the setup. Here's what's going on in the world relative to what we're talking about. And then we're going to get deeper into this how to set clear expectations for your team. And as Rachel said, it's sort of a meaty topic. It's a little bit interactive. I might ask you to sort of raise your hand and that kind of stuff. I'll try to see as many people as I can. But Rachel, if I miss anybody, just point them out, because I'm looking at a strip. I'm looking at like at an amusement park when you go into a little booth, and I only see like 3 or 4 of you. So that'd be great, because I want everyone engaged. So what are we going to do? We're going to talk about how to set clear expectations for your entire team. But generally, in order to set clear expectations, you have to sort of understand the context in which it's set. There has to be some cohesiveness to these expectations. So that's what we're really going to get down to today. Let me just grab the screen. So what are our goals? One is, at the highest level, I want to give you a realization that you're likely working harder and longer than you need to run your business productively. This isn't my opinion. This is a lot of research. I've been actually studying business for about 30 years, and really a lot in the last 4 or 5 years. And as Rachel said, I speak all over the country, and I've actually been international now, at least from my living room. And I ask a lot of basic questions, and I find that a lot of folks are struggling, and they're working a lot harder than they need to. And I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. And then really what we're going to do is spend most of our time and your time on is, how do you start to create a highly productive and engaged team? You've probably seen the stats that are out there, right? There's 25% of people are actively engaged. 35% are actually disactively engaged, meaning, and some of them are working against you. I don't know if the numbers are right, but generally you're looking to try to get 80 to 90% plus of your team engaged and working productively. That also was one of the reasons why we work harder and longer than we need to, is because we're not engaging all of our team. So what I'd like you to do is, if you are able to achieve these two things for your organization, for the team that you run, or just yourself, what would it mean to you? Just write it down.
All right, Jeannie, go ahead and unmute yourself, and we'd love to hear from you.
I am in the twilight of my career, so I think if I could do this, I would be less likely to retire or consider retiring, or maybe working in a different way if I could do this.
Cool. Yeah, it's hard, right? Anyone else?
We got a chat here from Randy. He said more time for the family, security for the business.
Exactly. Yep. Unfortunately, what happens is I've been a Vistage speaker for about 3 or 4 years. And one of the things, I don't know if anyone are Vistage folks here, I'm not sure how that relates to Small Giants, but they do a check-in and they give you a number and they say, how's your family and friends number? And I've done 40 or 50 of these talks, and it's almost always the lowest number they give, because they're consumed by their business. And I'm sure when they started, they figured, once I get going and things start working, I'll have more time for all these wonderful things I want to do, and I can spend more time with the family. And unfortunately, that isn't what happens. And one of the main reasons is that it's usually you or a small subset of the organization that's doing most of the work and most of the thinking and most of everything. And that doesn't have to be that way. So that's what we're definitely going to touch on. So let's keep going. So I'm going to give you my bio. So this is great. We can read it. So basically what this means is, I've done a lot of stuff, meaning I made a lot of mistakes. And I try to help people to not make my mistakes, they can make their own. The other thing is that I have gray hair, right? But there's one thing I want to do, since this is a purpose-driven organization. I do have a core purpose. My core purpose is called simplified servanthood. It's at the bottom of the slide. And what that means to me is I try to spend each working moment helping to advance the human condition through having enlightened leaders focus on the few things that truly matter to their customers and their teams. What does that mean? That means that we have really only two things, supposedly, to love and to work, right? Those are the two things in most life, if you believe Freud and all these other guys, right? Those are the main things that drive us. And we spend a lot of time at work. And often many of us don't love work. And that's completely preventable. And so what I try to do is work with enlightened leaders, I mean, people like who join Small Giants or others who don't think that they know all the answers, and they're humble and they're learners and all those kinds of things. Because if there are a few things that truly matter in business and in life, but those few things matter tremendously. And one of those things is people. So we're going to talk about that a lot today. So let's talk about the problem. So here's the problem. The longer you're in business, the harder it is to stay in business. This is a thing done by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, started in 1994, and they looked at small and medium businesses, and as time goes by, you have less and less chance of surviving. That's the sad news, right? The good news is it doesn't have to be that way. There are plenty of businesses that last for generations, for centuries. And what I've found is they do a few things really well. And you know what? They're almost always exactly the same few things. But nobody ever teaches us that, right? We have to figure it out or make a lot of mistakes. So that's the problem, right? So you got an 80% chance of surviving your first year, and then you have about a 20% chance of making it past year to year 20. So those of you who have lasted more than 5 years, congratulations. You're actually broke through the 50-50 barrier. And those of you who 10, 15 years, you're becoming the exception. So know that that's a rare thing. So let's talk a little bit about that. I like to call it a resilient growth framework. So we talked a little bit about failure, right? And success, but mostly failure. Success is different. We can talk about failure, meaning basically you're out of business. That's pretty easy. It's black and white. What is success? How do you decide what that is? Is that amount of time? Is that amount of money? Is there some sort of satisfaction that you're getting? That's a little more squishy for folks. But let's assume that it's black and white, and we can say success is X. The problem with that is that there's this thing in the middle, which is called struggle. So those are people who survive past 5, 10, and 15 years aren't necessarily thriving. They're often struggling. They're spending a lot of time at work. They're surviving through force of will, luck, effort, timing. And that's not as much fun either, right? As Gene said, if it was more fun, I'd probably do it longer. There are plenty of owners that do that. It's just so hard. And trust me, I did 10 startups. So I know the ups and downs of the day and that kind of thing. And yes, I am a glutton for punishment for doing 10 startups. So why is that, right? Does it have to be this way? And I think it's no. For the most part, it's no. There are some businesses that should go out of business. They don't really solve the problem we're solving. They're not doing it in a certain way. But most businesses that struggle or fail don't need to, and they probably shouldn't. But things happen. So let's talk a little bit about that. So when I work as a startup guy, right? And I don't know how many people have started their own business or started multiple businesses. There's this proverbial hockey stick, right? And that's what it looks like, right? You struggle for a little while, maybe it's months or years, and then there's something happens, something magical happens, and off you go, right? And that's what we're going for. Yay, we made it. But that's not what happens. It never happens that way. What happens is if you start to have some success, people want some of it. So you get more competition. You start to hire more people, and maybe you didn't hire well, or decisions slow down, or they hire bad people, and things start to fall off the rails a little bit. And by the way, this is any business, doesn't matter who it is. So let's use Apple, right? So Apple, because everyone knows it, we generally know who they are. They're pretty popular. Clearly their first round, they almost went out of business. They kicked Steve Jobs out. Scully came in and was fired with 90 days of cash left in the bank. Steve Jobs came in on day one. He had 90 days to fix it. And he said, look, the first thing they have to do is survive. So he cut a ton of stuff. They had 23 different product lines when he came in. He cut it to 4, cut it to the 4 most profitable product lines so they could survive. What he did is, if you would, he kind of put a little higher lip on the arrow. So he extended that arrow a little bit so they could last more than 90 days. Because he had no idea what to do next. He was buying time, because the next thing you're supposed to do is figure out the next cycle. But if you don't, it's usually for a whole bunch of different reasons, right? And there are a whole bunch listed here, right? I about 3 or 4 years ago, I typed into Google, why do businesses go out of business? And then I just started writing down all the reasons. At 35, I stopped. There are lots of ways to go out of business. It's really easy to go out of business, right? And poor business model, the business outgrows the people, you grow too fast, you overexpand. You know, most businesses die of indigestion, not of starvation. You do too many things. You go too wide, you spread yourself too thin, and your cash gets depleted, right? So there's lots of really good reasons to go out of business. Lots of good, easy ways to do it. Those that stay at a business, that are above the line, that keep figuring out the future, do a few things really well. And what I've found is that they do 3 things really well consistently. They understand that performance is a team sport. Culture is a cool thing. And I teach, I teach purpose and values and culture and all that kind of stuff. But I've come to believe that culture is a great attractor of people. From an organizational perspective, I want to work for that kind of company, right? They're a great place to work for, right? They're a small giant. I want to work at a small giant because there's this sort of aura around it, right? But people stay because they're on a great team, right? If you're on a really crappy culture but a great team, you'll probably stay longer. If you're on a really great culture and a crappy team, you probably will leave. You'll either leave the team or leave the company, which is terrible because you're probably a great employee. The next thing is they have a coherent leadership operating system. And that basically is connecting strategy and execution. And then lastly, if they really want to grow, cash is your primary growth metric for financial growth metric, not revenue, not profit. Why? Because growth sucks cash. And if you want to grow, you have to spend in front of what you want to grow. So you have to have the money. And COVID is shining a really disinfectant light on this right now, right? Those people that didn't plan ahead are struggling tremendously, but they don't have to. How would they do that? So I'm a sales marketing guy, so I like metaphor. And so we're going to build a house together really quickly. If you want to create a resilient growth framework, you have to start with a really good foundation, right? And again, this is built a lot about around the small giants philosophy. It's around culture, it's around purpose, those kinds of things. So you want to have a really strong cultural system because that's super important. And it contains these things. I'm not going to go into a lot of depth on them. The next thing is you have to make sure that your leadership team is cohesive. What I mean by that is you can fight in a really healthy way, right? You can tell each other the kind truth, as Pat Lencioni says. The next thing is you have to have some sort of human system, meaning you have to be able to understand the value of your A players. When I go around, I've spoken to hundreds and hundreds of CEOs and I ask them the same thing. I say, how many people have A players? And they all raise their hand. I say, how much more productive are they than everyone else? And generally the answer I get is somewhere between 2 and 3 times more productive. And I ask them, do you pay them 2 times or 3 times more than everyone else? They say, no. I say, well, that's probably the best investment you've ever made. So how do you keep them? What we do when we have A players, we ignore them. Why? Because they don't need management. They don't need any, they meet and exceed their goals. They do everything that they need to do. Sorry, I'm still sweating from I was on the elliptical before I got here, so I'm sweating a little. I apologize. It's not that I'm nervous. I'm actually very excited. So you have to really make sure you play with your A players well. You have to give them challenges. You have to make sure that they're engaged. If they're not, they leave first. The next thing is the rest is the team and the team leaders, right? The rest of the organization. So those are all the people in the organization. You have to have a strong foundation, a strong structure. Now you have to run the house, right? If you're gonna have a good house, you have to have food and furniture and appliances and plumbing and wiring and all that kind of stuff. And that is 3 things: strategy, execution, and cash. And if you have a good strategy, not an awesome strategy, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be decent. It has to make sure that you keep your customer in mind, and then you execute on it, and then you get better at your strategy and better at your strategy. And you keep going, right? The great example of this is Southwest. It's overused, but it's such a good example. Southwest has an awesome strategy. It is called Wheels Up. It's 2 words, that's it. And it says everything you need to know about Southwest, which is they make money when the plane's in the air. Everything they do is focused on getting the plane in the air, right? And they execute on that. One of the really cool stories I heard from Herb Kelleher, who was interviewed a few years ago, he said, one of the reasons that we're really efficient is we had to be, because he was running out of money somewhere in the 70s or the 80s. And they had to sell a plane. They only had 4 planes. And they were going from Dallas to Houston to San Antonio, because this was regional. This was before deregulation. So they owned those 3 areas, and they were competing with like Texas Air and something else. And he said, look, we ran out of money. We had to sell a plane. So we had to figure out how to do it with 3 planes. We had to be much more efficient, right? That's why they put us through all this crap. They put us through, right, through the cattle lines and the salt and sweets that we get and all the things that they do, because they want to keep their costs low. But they want to give you lots of options. So that's about Wheels Up. So you have to have a good, strong strategy. If you can say it in 2 words or 3 words, then you probably have a really good strategy. Everyone, you should try this. I've not done this, but if you fly Southwest sometime in the future, I'm sure, ask the person who's checking you in what their strategy is. So they're supposed to know it. Everyone knows the strategy. They should say, oh, our strategy is Wheels Up. And they're all thinking that way. And then if you do that really well, then you have cash. And cash, as I said, cash is fuel. Cash drives your business. Now so that's 6 different systems. There's one system that's the underpinning of all of this. In New England, we don't have this problem because all of our homes are built on bedrock, but there are parts of the country that they're not. It's on soil. So you have to be careful. You can build a really good house, but if you don't have bedrock underneath, it could sink or sort of teeter. Those things are what I call your leadership system. They're about vision. You have to have a good vision. If you're a leader, you have to be able to tell your followers where you're going, because that's why they're following you, right? They need to see it. You need to describe it in a way that they see it as if it has already happened. I'm a big fan of Cameron Herold and Vivid Vision. I highly recommend, if you haven't done it, get the book. It's just a recipe book. Follow it and write out your vision. The next is change. If you're a leader who wants to grow, which I think most small giants want to grow, you're all about change. Do you have a change process? How do you do change in your organization? It should be the same thing for everything you do, whether you want to move a mailbox 10 feet or you want to completely change your strategy. It should be the same exact process. It's just, how long does it take? One might take 10 minutes, one might take 10 months. Decision-making, right? You're making decisions all the time. Do you have a decision-making framework? How do you make decisions in your organization? One of the things that I found is that people don't first understand, what kind of decision am I making? Is it a simple decision, complicated decision, complex decision? Right? And with COVID, it was chaos, right? Just make a decision, then we'll figure it out. But you should really understand which one you're doing, because often we make decisions as if it's in a particular framework, like a best practice framework, and it's not. It's in a complex situation, like pricing. Trying to figure out what people will pay is really hard, because you have to get into the heads of all of your customers, and they're not going to tell you, right? They're going to, they want to pay as little as possible, and you want to have them pay you as much as possible without gouging them, of course. So that's a complex decision. That's a completely different set of things that you would do than if you would run a basic decision, right? How to answer the phone or whatever. So making a decision. And the last thing is I call neuro leadership, which is basically you have to lead with the brain in mind. And when you understand the brain, you understand that we're all crazy. We're all irrational, impulsive, highly emotional beings, right? That's just who we are. That's the brain we got, right? Our brain is somewhere between 10 and 50,000 years old, depending on who you read. It hasn't really had a major upgrade since then. But we certainly work in a completely different world than we're in today, right? So that's the framework that's generally the framework I teach to my clients. But it's a really good one in general. There's lots of good stuff. There's EOS and there's scaling up and there's eMyth and there's all this stuff. But my advice always is at least have one. Having one is better than not having one at all. And then depending on what you want to do is the kind of thing you want to focus on. I like to go at it from a really holistic perspective, where like EOS is more execution, really focuses on meetings and priorities and that kind of stuff. They're all good, depending on what you want. So let me just do a quick review. 1, most businesses die or struggle, very few thrive. The leader's main jobs are to predict the future, not to run the day-to-day. Your job, once you start figuring out your business model, is to start firing yourself from the day-to-day. The only way you can start predicting the future is to give yourself time to do that. When I ask people about this, I ask them, when do you get your best ideas? What is going on? And most of them say, I'm running, I'm in the shower, I'm on a walk, I'm just hanging out. You're not doing anything, right? You're not engaged. You're not engaging your brain actively, cognitively, because that's when the best ideas come. Your brain gets the best ideas when it's relaxed, because generally it's insight, which is a connection of two or more things, disparate, loosely connected things. So in order to do that, you have to stop running your business day to day. You can't have the line outside your office. You can't have 1,000 emails. You need to sit back and relax. You need to be able to go away for a period of time and be able to think. Brian Halligan is a quasi friend of mine. He runs HubSpot and he writes a lot, and and he's got a pretty successful business. And I said, give me the one thing, Brian, if you could say one thing that you did that was really the underpinning of this going from 0 to 500, 600, $700 million in like 7 or 8 years, what would it be? And he took no time. It was in an email exchange. He said, every Friday I stay home and I think. Every Friday. Bill Gates does his Think Week, right? He goes away. Some we saw it on Netflix, right? He goes to some cabin in the woods. You have to be able to think. And that means you have to get out of the day-to-day. You have to create a growth framework that we already talked about, which is about team, system, and cash. So what we're going to do today, since I think people really are the underpinning of everything that we do, we're going to focus a lot on people today. But before we move on, that was a lot of stuff. Does anyone want to make a question, a comment, a concern? I'm actually doing pretty good on time, so.
Any questions so far? Yeah, go ahead, Susan.
If I have a question, it's kind of a question comment, when you're thinking about small businesses and how to be able to afford to think, which means that you've got to have somebody else doing really well, and they have to do really well and productively, as you mentioned upstream. So that's just a challenge. I don't know how you get around that challenge in really small businesses. And I'm talking about businesses that are under $3 million with 5 or 6 people or something.
I'm with you. I'm a small business. You're looking at it. I'm it. I have no one working for me. I do everything. I bill my people. I answer the phone. I do everything. But I do outsource stuff. I use Fiverr for stuff. I just highlights, someone from Sri Lanka or wherever does some stuff for me because I don't want to do it. I always try to be more efficient. Like I use Calendly for my calendar. I read years ago, it's 8 back and forths to schedule a meeting. That's a lot. I just give you my calendar. Here, pick a time, right? I use Wave for invoices. It's super simple. I do credit cards, and I don't show up if you haven't paid me. It cuts out like hours of stuff in the day of trying to get money and doing all these things. So there's little stuff you can do, but there's lots of other stuff you can do. And actually it's a bit of a teaser when we do the hour and a half in August. I'm going to give you some very specific things that you can do that will allow you to figure out which of the things can I start to move off my plate or prepare when I actually have a little time to move things off my plate. Because you can't, believe it or not, you can. But you got to think it through. It's not easy, and you can't move everything off, or you'll have to just sort of start and then slowly. But if you can carve an hour out a week and then 2 hours out a week, and I'll tell you, I ran a relatively small business. We were a few $1 million, and I did something similar to this. I did something more like EOS than what I teach, and it worked tremendously. And I knew it was working really well when by 11 o'clock every single day, I was done. I had nothing else to do day to day. All my reports were done. All my one-on-ones were done. Everything was done. So what did I do? I walked around. I talked to people. I went to conferences so I could learn more about the industry. I did all these things. I talked to customers more. And by the way, when I was able to do that, I was then able to free up more time because I was smarter and I learned all this stuff. And actually the business group, because I said, here's a really cool idea. We do email. Why don't we focus on archiving and make sure that we're letting people archive their emails so we can, because they can move them off their thing. Guess what? Our ASP went up 30% in about 6 months. It's amazing how if you have more time, you can actually create more money. Not easy to do, I get it. but it's doable. All right, I'm going to keep going so we stay on track, but thank you for the question. So I got to steal this back. All right, and then we're sharing again. All right, cool. Thank you for your question. All right, so let's start the exercise. But let's do a little primer. So does everyone have a 3x5 card or a piece of paper, or you can have a laptop, it doesn't matter. You just need something so you can write down. So before we start, has anyone had this experience? You're either in charge or you're the one being talked to. There's someone on your team, they're just not measuring up. You got to have the talk, right? You got to invite them to your office and just let them know you're disappointed. And you go through the whole thing and you lay out your whole argument, and they look at you and their eyes are like, what do you mean? I'm doing great, aren't I? I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing. They're flabbergasted, which I love that word, right? Has anyone had that experience? It happens. So what I found is, my theory is that's about expectations. They think they're doing a good job because they're doing the things that they think are important really well, or at least they think they are. You would like them to do something else or have a different outcome. One of the things I think this connects to is the job description. Has anyone written a job description? Probably everybody, right? Okay, how many bullets are on the job description? 10, 15, 20? Okay, I know Rachel and Hamza, they are wicked smart. I bet they can't remember 20 things. How can you expect this person to remember everything to do? And by the way, my theory is that they're doing the bottom of the list and you want them to do the top. That's why you're disconnected. So what this exercise is about figuring out the top and setting expectations on both sides of what are the most important things that this particular function that you're doing it should be doing. And I'm very clear, if you see, it's called the 3x5 function exercise. It's not a job. It's not a title. It's a function. Marketing is a function. Sales is a function. If you run sales and marketing, you don't have one job, you actually have two. I had three when I was telling you the story. I was the GM, so I ran the entire division. I also ran marketing, so I was a divisional marketing head. I had two jobs. And then I had so much time that they asked me to be the CMO of the entire $120 million company. So I had three jobs. I had three functions. They didn't give me a raise, by the way, but that's okay. It's a whole other story. So I like to think of things as in functions, not in titles, because it's really important, especially, if you're, Gene or whoever else was asking the question, if you're running a small company, you probably have 3, 4, 5 jobs. What you need to do is start firing yourself from each or part of each job as often and as quickly as possible. That's how you start making time for yourself. How do you do that? I'm going to show you a little bit, but I'm going to tell you one story and give you an example. So one of my clients is a chiropractor, and I'm just outside of Boston in a town called Sudbury, and he has a really popular practice. And what we did is we decided to trade. So this is the barter relationship. So he cracks me and adjusts me and does all these things and helps my family. And I speak to him like 2-3 hours a month. And I just ask him questions and we work through stuff. So one of the things he was complaining about, he said, look, in order for my practice to grow, I have to add another doctor. And I said, well, how do you do that? He said, well, I have an ad and I put it in, the paper. There's 2 or 3 chiropractic colleges around here. There's other stuff. I said, well, tell me what the ad is. And this is what his ad was. A waiting list practice in Metro Boston. I gotta shut this, hang on one second. He's looking for an ambitious doctor of chiropractic, that's what DC is, with the right skill set to join our multi-doctor practice. Applicant must be active release techniques, proficiency in motion palpitation, blah, blah, blah. It's an excellent opportunity for the right DC to join, leading edge health and wellness, whatever, we'll train you for success. So that's good, right? Seems fine. And I said, well, how effective is that? He said, well, we've been running it for 10 months. I had 1 applicant and I ruled him out on the phone. And now he would be a small giant. He's probably not big enough, but he's all about purpose and value. So he had them all written down. So I asked him a few questions. I said, so describe for me the optimal person that you want. And he went through that. I said, what values do you want them to have? What is your purpose? What do they get out of this relationship? So I said, basically go up to be cohesive to your strategy, who you are, and go down to them. What matters to them? And I said, let me talk to you. Wrote a bunch of stuff and we wrote it. We rewrote it. It took 30 minutes. This entire conversation took 30 minutes. And this is what we wrote. We are a successful practice in data, sounds the same, which operates with integrity and passion to help active people get out of pain, perform better, and live healthy lives. Purpose and values right there. We are looking for an associate chiropractor that is certified in active release techniques, proficient in motion palpitation, blah, 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 and is interested in earning $200,000 to $300,000 yearly, helping 35 to 55 patients to help expand our practice. It's fewer words, and he put it out, and in 1 week, he had 4 responses. He hired one of the people, and she was great. Now, I actually spoke to him afterwards, because again, it's all about essentials, right? It's all about making sure you're asking for the right thing. The bullet list that we put together is like everything we want, but it's not everything we need. I think a job description should be about who do you want and what minimally do they need, and then say, oh, by the way, if you have other stuff, cool, that'd be great, but you need to have this. So I asked him, and I said, do they really need to be certified in active release techniques? It takes like 6 to 9 months. It's expensive. And he said, no, they don't have to be. So I said, take it out, or say, or is willing to be trained in that. Because what he put out, anyone who isn't certified in active release techniques will not apply. They could be great with integrity and passion. They would love to work with active clients, but they would never apply, right? So those are the kind of things you need to think about. So here's what we're going to do as a group, is we're going to create a situation so we can create cards, if you will, or these types of things. It doesn't have to be a physical card, but that will allow each function to be very clear on what the expectations are and how we measure them. So here's one example that we're going to do. One is, so it's a sales leader. So that's the function. You don't have to write function. You can write CEO or head of marketing or whatever it is on your card. If you are a small business owner, then I recommend that you go to the highest level that you work in the organization, and that should be on your card, right? So if you're the CEO and you run engineering and you also run marketing, pick CEO, and that should be your thing. If you do multiple teams, if you run sales and marketing, you just pick one. Doesn't matter which one it is. This is just practice. All right, now here's what it would look like. Hang on, let me move there we go, now I can see it. Okay, so you wanna write on the why do I get paid on the top of the card, all right? So if you actually had a card, let's say this is your card, you would write sales leader here, and then you just flip it over, and then you're like, why do I get paid on the top? And then underneath that, you would write the key outcomes. What are the key outcomes? You can't have any more than 5. You can have fewer than 5. I'm a big fan of fewer is better. Write them out. So in this case, this particular role was the key outcomes are to convert leads to opportunities, revenue growth, sales efficiency ratio, market share growth, and sales team development plans. And then the metrics for each are how many opportunities per month, or it could be per quarter, or whatever it is, per week, it doesn't matter. The metrics are, you decide. And then the revenue growth is percentage growth over last year. Sales efficiency ratio is the dollars of contribution margin towards salary. And those of you who don't know what contribution margin is basically how much money do you make minus how much does it cost you to make that much money. Very high level kind of thing. And then market share growth is how much growth do we have over last year. And then sales development plans, which is percent completed, right? All my sales team, everyone on my sales team should have their own development plan. What does he or she need to do to grow, to be better, et cetera. And those of you who don't know, sales efficiency ratio is measured by how many dollars of contribution margin are generated for every dollar of sales of the team's salary. So the contribution margin should be greater than their salary, right? Salespeople are paying other people's salaries. So I want each of you to make your own card. And what we're going to do is we're going to ask Hamza, who is our breakout maven, we'll put you into rooms, 3 in a room. Each of you will get 5 minutes. What you're going to do before we do that is take like 2 or 3 minutes and write out your own card. So like in 3 minutes, she'll put you in the room. Then I want each of you to share your card with the other people in your room. And my rules are there's no disclaimers, there's no provisos, there's no whatever, just read your card, right? And then your job, if you're listening to that person, there are 2 jobs. One is to help us out, is to make sure you stay on track. One person should be the timer, because each of you is going to get 5 minutes, and trust me, it's going to go really fast. So at like 4 minutes, just give that person a heads up, hey, we got to switch to the other person. Hamza is also going to help. We're going to send you some chat things to get you there as well, but that'll help. The second thing is your job is to be their coach. Now, coaches do 3 things really well. One is they give sincere praise, right? I might say, Rachel, wow, you really do a lot of stuff. I love the way you did this and this. It needs to be sincere, right? You know, that gave me some great ideas. Terrific. Now, what you've done is you sent 4 chemicals through our head that are really great. Dopamine, endorphins, serotonin, and oxytocin, which means that she's actually more likely to take any feedback that you may give her, believe it or not. It's a little trick. The second thing is that you have to ask clarifying questions first. Don't assume that you know what they meant. It also acknowledges the value that they put, the time, etc. And then lastly, if you must give feedback, and by the way, I say must, you don't actually have to give feedback, but if you feel that you must, it's so important, you have such value to add, you must get verbal permission. The reason you get verbal permission, another trick of the brain is, we don't like feedback. Our brain hates it. And the first thing we do is reject it. Why? Because it's new. And the brain hates new. New to brain is death or injury. It doesn't know the difference. So when you ask permission, you actually increase your chances that your feedback will actually be heard and maybe taken in. But you have to get it. So those are your rules. So with that, what I'd like you to do is pick your function. What are we at for times? We're at 1:39, or a little over. So take like 1 minute, do a really quick card, and then Hamza, I'll let you, in a minute or so, do your magic with the breakout rooms.
Sounds good. All right,
Cool.
we'll see you all in 1 minute. Okay, I still see a couple of heads down, but that was our 1 minute. So what's going to happen now is we're going to break you out into some smaller groups. We'll jump in with when you should switch to the next person. We encourage you to turn your video on, but if you can't or you're just not feeling it today, we'd love you to still participate just with audio. So with that, we're going to break you out into a couple groups, and we'll see you in about 15 minutes.
All right, good luck, everybody.
Ready?
All right, great. I think they all come back at once, right? So they should all be here?
Yep.
We're
Cool.
all here.
All right. So thank you for doing that. So I want to ask a question. So what did you notice when you were doing that? Either giving or receiving. Who wants to share?
Yeah, go ahead, Carolyn.
Clarity.
Clarity. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Minnow, go ahead.
Give a little more. What do you mean by that?
Sorry, I thought we were just yelling out things. Just being succinct, kind of. I have many hats, many jobs, so picking one of them and saying what does success look like, being able to explain it, and having others understand that.
Cool. Did Carolyn have her?
Yeah, go ahead, Carolyn.
Well, I will say 2 things. That first of all, I did all of the talking and then the time went by so fast. My little counterpart did not have time to share hers, so I apologize about that. But secondly, as we were talking through there, the first few minutes, I only had time to write down the outcomes. And so we tried to talk through the metrics, and I realized that some of those I didn't even truly have. I was trying to articulate some of those metrics, but I didn't even have, I don't have that identified. So that was kind of like what someone said, clarity. That might be some clarity that I took away, is I might need to identify what those metrics are.
Cool. Yeah, in August, we're going to go in a lot more depth. You're going to have actual cards. You're going to finish. We're going to talk them through. And then we're going to take them and then do more with them. So this is just sort of it's mostly like a aha, like, wow, this is really interesting. But who else? Well, let's do one more notice, and then I got to hand it back to Rachel to wrap us up.
We got one through chat. So Jeannie said more engagement, you have to participate, collaborate.
Yeah, so I'll close with one more thing. So what I love about this is that it's good for you to understand your own role, gives you some clarity, but what you want to do, one of the magical things of this is you ask your team to do it too. So everyone who reports to you, have them write up their own card. and then you write up your version of their card, and then you meet them one-on-one, and you can't leave the room until you have one card. You don't have to agree, you just have to align. You can't have more than 5 things on it. And it's amazing how it opens up. And by the way, what I've found is their card is often better than yours. It's amazing because they do the job, right? And they're engrossed in it, right? But you can tweak them a little bit. So that's a really cool thing to do with it. All right. So what we're going to do next time is as I said, we're going to take 3x5 cards that you did here, and you can complete them. You can bring them back in August. We're going to go into a little more depth. We're going to talk about it a little bit more. Then we're going to take those cards. We're going to break them down into how do we use them? Well, I gave you one tip now, but there are other different ways to use them as well. Then, similar to what Jean said, then we're going to start to go through and say, which of these things on this card should I start handing over to other people so they can start doing these things instead of me? Mostly because I don't really like doing this thing. I have to do it. I'm okay at it or I suck at it, but I feel like it's important for this function to do that. But that's okay. As I said, we have this preconceived notion that this is what a job is. But guess what? We made everything up. There's no preconceived notion to anything. You can move stuff around. As long as the work gets done by the team, who cares which job does it, right? So that's what we're going to do next time. So with that, I will hand it over to Rachel.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for participating, for going into the breakout groups. What Bill was mentioning there, in case you missed it at the beginning, we do have a follow-up leadership lab that's based on this same concept coming up at the end of August. It's August 26th. We have a little bit longer time, so we can dig in a little bit deeper, do some more of those exercises also that Bill mentioned. You'll get an email. You should get it in about 4 minutes here with more details and a link to register. So I hope we'll see you there. And I'll also share, if Bill's open to it, some contact information if you have more questions after this. So we can get those answered. And I hope that we'll see you all in August.
Yeah, feel free. You'll have my email. Shoot me a note. I'm happy to help.
Okay, well that's it for this one. Check out more Small Giants workshops at smallgiants.org.